Hello everybody from District 33 and welcome to the virtual safety clinic. I'm Danielle Delina and I'm the coach coordinator from District 33. I'm not the usual person who runs a safety clinic, but for this portion I will do my best. So I will be presenting our safety clinic today. So I will be reading a lot of it because I do not know this all offhand, and I will be going in the order of the handout that can be found on our District 33 website. There's a lot to cover here, and because I'm not going to go over all of this, you can read it for yourself, you can download it, or you can read it from the website. I will just go over the gist of it, and I will go over what is the most important and what pertains to you as a coach. The rest of it you can read. Some of it's very specific details that you don't need to know. So I'm going to give you exactly what you need to know from this, and the rest you can read yourself. Okay, so first, evaluating injuries. So treatment depends on symptoms and signs. A symptom is what your player reports, i.e. this hurts, that hurts, I can't move my elbow, etc. A sign is something that you can see. So if it's bright red and swollen, that's a sign. So you'll use both signs and symptoms to evaluate and see exactly what the problem is and then decide the treatment from there. So for initial treatment, you're going to follow PRACEs. So you're going to do protection, rest, ice, compression, elevation, and support. So communication. Managers and coaches must cultivate timely and open, trusted, two-way communication. So basically, keep an open communication with your parents. You can tell them when their player gets hurt. They'll tell you when their kid got hurt somewhere else. Maybe he sprained his ankle at school, so go easy on the running. But keep the communication open so both of you can work together to keep your players healthy on the field and off the field. In the absence of a parent, you are the one that has to decide to call EMS. So a broken bone, a seizure, something like that, you're calling EMS automatically. For other situations where it's sprained, they probably need to see a doctor. Tell the parents and they can decide whether to drive them to the emergency room or not. Some people, I know my family, we're the type of people where, like, if I have a heart attack, you're driving me, you better not call an ambulance for that. So every family is different, so make sure you know what they want to do. Again, seizures and broken stuff, you definitely want to call EMS. But for the smaller stuff, you can leave it up to the parents. So keep that communication open on what they want to do. Usually they're around somewhere. This is a COVID year though, so because they may or not be in the stands, make sure that you have all your phone numbers correct on your contact list. You must have a first aid kit and a safety plan, which nowadays are virtual, so you might have a little link on the phone. Chemical ice packs at games and practices. Though most leagues prefer you ask them and they'll give you the ice packs from the snack bar. I know snack bars may or may not be open this year, but sometimes they prefer you get real ice as opposed to the little chemical ice packs. But make sure you have them on hand in case nobody has fresh ice available. You want to have a list of emergency contacts in your binder. And instructions on how to get to where you are, especially at away games. If you're at a field that you do not know where you are, make sure when you get there you have the address down just in case something happens, or the other league, the other team probably knows the address better. You can ask them, and then you can make a chain out there. So if you're in a field that's way inside of a park, have people in a kind of people chain out to the parking lot, so as soon as EMS gets there, they can, the first person flags them down and they can point to the direction to go, and the next person can flag them down. This way EMS can get to where they need to go right away. Now let's talk about musculoskeletal. So this is broken bones, muscles, ligaments, torn stuff. I'm going to go over this briefly because a lot of this, as being a parent and being an adult, you kind of know how to deal with most of the stuff already. And you can't give medications, so that's out of the way as well. So let's go over this quickly. Broken bones and fractures. So you're not an X-ray machine. You can't really tell if something is broken or not. What you can do is you can see how the child's reacting. If they are screaming, nothing will stop it. It's probably broken. You can call 911. You can have the parent decide to bring them. Depends. Some fields are really close to a hospital, some are not. So with a suspected broken bone or fracture, don't move a player. Don't move their leg or arm or whatever it is, keep it still. If it's bleeding, stop the bleeding, apply direct pressure, do whatever you can to stop the bleeding. If it's not bleeding, just don't move it. Use a SAM splint or whatever you have to keep it still while you call for EMS. If it's big and red and swollen, if you can obviously see a joint out of place, then it kind of gives you a clue something's wrong. Immobilize it and call EMS. For small joints like fingers and toes, for fingers, you can buddy tape it until they can get seen. For toes, you really don't do a whole much. Just leave it in the shoe because the shoebox keeps it protected enough to keep it from getting further injury or anything like that. Keep it in that. Go have the parent bring him in. Okay, for falls, have the individual lay down, don't move them wherever they fell, just leave them in that spot, clear the dugout around. For most injuries, kids go in the dugout while you're dealing with things. If they fell from a height that's 3 times their height, that is major trauma. That is automatically EMS every time that you're calling EMS. Don't move their spine, don't move anything. Even if they feel like they can get up, keep them there anyway until EMS gets there. Okay, contusions. Contusion is a fancy word for a bruise. Pretty much you're just gonna ice it. If it looks like it's out of place, if it looks like it's in the kidney, the spleen, or the testes, is some kind of soft spot, evaluate it. And if you feel like it needs treatment, then definitely call EMS. If not, just ice that bad boy and you're good to go. For muscle pulls and strains, same thing. If it looks like it's pulled, they're probably injured. Stop using it, rest, ice, wrap it up, you're good to go. Again, if it looks like it's, use your judgment. If it looks like it's worse, call EMS. Otherwise, ice it and wrap it up. To avoid that, stretching and warming up before games is helpful. Overuse injuries. Overuse injuries. This is pitching your kids too much or too much of a certain repetitive motion. You don't want to do that with your kids. Make sure that you watch it when they start doing this. It's time to pull them out. You don't want to keep doing it further and affect their growth plates. That is a thing and it can happen, so don't let it happen. Another is to develop skills at an appropriate age, which means you are not teaching an 8-year-old to throw a curveball. They don't need a curveball at this age. Have you seen 8-year-olds play? They don't need a curveball. I mean, don't do it. It's not worth ruining a kid's arm for Little League, which means nothing in the long game. High school, college, that's when they need to have their health the most. And so do not injure them when they're nice and young and ruin their future for them. It is not worth it for a Little League game. For regular overuse injuries, you're just going to ice it and rest it. That's the number one treatment for that. For sprains, same thing as muscle pulls. Ice it, wrap it up, don't move it, and rest it. Play protocol. There's a whole thing on it that you can read in the handout. I'm going to give the gist of it. A kid gets injured, he goes to the doctor. The doctor is going to give him a return to play protocol. For example, if it's a concussion, week 1, he's going to be in the dark, no TV, resting his eyes, everything like that. And then the next week, he might be allowed to do a little bit more. And then eventually he can warm up maybe. Then he can run or probably walk. He can walk a little bit and then he'll be allowed to run. So it'll be this progressive introduction back into physical activity. So the doctor comes up with it. All you have to do is just follow the plan. And now environmental injuries. So they say hydration is best up to 24 hours before game or practices because it's already in your system. It's already running through. So you have 3 levels of this, of heat injury. You have heat illness, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Each one being worse than the other. So heat illness, you just get some cramping, some sweating, drink a cold water, sit in the shade, you're good to go. Heat exhaustion is a little bit more. That's when you start getting dizzy and they get really weak. Pull them out of the sun, keep them in the shade, give them some water, and if you have some cooling packs, you could put them on the armpits. And they say the groin, but you might not want to go groin, but you might want to go in that area around, like in between where the leg, like in between the hip where the leg meets the groin, in that area. And last, you have heat stroke. Heat stroke, you're calling 911 because it's already bad and just goes downhill from there. So that is when cells are beginning to die because they're not hydrated enough. So if that player stops sweating, not just players, this can happen to coaches too. It happens It happened a couple of years in fall ball. One of our coaches actually passed out. If you're watching this, sorry to bring it up. But yeah, so as a coach, make sure you are staying hydrated as well. But when somebody stops sweating, they can have seizures, they can lead to coma. It's bad. So if it gets to the point where they physically feel hot and they're no longer sweating, you could tell their eyes kind of glaze out, you call 911, because at that point they're going to need an IV. You want to take a cool rag if you have it, put some water on it to cool it down, put it on them, ice packs on the armpits and groin areas again, just keeping the core cool, and then until EMS arrives. Okay, asthma. If a kid has asthma, they usually have an inhaler and they usually know how to use it. Sometimes the parents use it for them. And if it's the little guys, if it's T-ball, you can let a parent come on the field and do that if they need to do that. It's not a problem whatsoever. Health always comes first, and that's the same thing with an EpiPen. So if a child has anaphylactic shock, use an EpiPen. A lot of kids probably don't know how to use it themselves. I mean, you gotta jam it in the leg, and then you hold it there for about 10 Mississippis as the medicine is getting into them. You have to use an epi. You're shoving it into the side of their leg for 10 Mississippis, holding it down. After 10 Mississippis, you can let it go. Now, not a lot of people know this, but with EpiPens, they're only made to the epi is in their system for a short amount of time, okay? And so it may be stopping the reaction now, but that reaction can come back again once that medicine wears out. That's why they always come in 2 packs in case you need to do a second one. So if you have to use that, make sure you have called EMS so they are already on the way. And if you need to use a second one, use the second one, because right now we're saving lives right now. So use the second one until EMS arrives. So make sure that you know how to use it. Usually the parents will be there and they can do it. Again, any situation where you are uncomfortable with how to do something and the parents are there, let them do it. It's better for insurance that way, and it's better for the kid that way, because they trust their parent to do that kind of thing. And it may have happened in the past, so they may already know what to do. Again, the medications cannot be expired. Now, when it comes to spider bites, insect bites, you can wash the area and just put a little cold compress on it. That's it. Not too much you can do for that, and just watch out for anaphylactic shock in case they don't know that they're allergic to something. If it's a scorpion or a bee, and they might not know it. So just watch out for that after they get stung. Put a little cold on it and then just wait. For a snake bite, you're going to call 911. You're going to lay the kid down in a neutral position. You don't want to put ice on it, and you don't want to wrap it up, because that will stop. It'll cause the poison to pool in one area, and will also stop the good cells from coming in to fix it. So you're stopping the good reaction, and you're also pooling that poison into one. So you don't want to constrict it, and you don't want to ice it. You just want to keep them neutral. If you can raise it a little bit, but it may or may not make too much of a difference. But that you're going to call EMS. And we do have snakes in District 33 in a couple different sites, so make sure that you are aware of that. All right, nosebleeds. Nosebleeds, don't have them put their head back. They'll drown on their own blood. Just have them hold it forward. You're going to pinch the bridge of the nose and then just hold it there. If the bleeding does not stop, you can use a tampon. But I will tell you, most kids are not going to let you put a tampon in their nose. I don't even think any of our adults will let you do that, even though it's really good and it's made for absorbing, but people won't let you do it. So you can use tissue or gauze or whatever you have. Just pinch the nose till it stops bleeding. When it comes to injuries to teeth, it's actually cool that you can replace them if in less than an hour, I think it is. And so if a tooth gets knocked out, you can hold on to it in milk or water, and this is so gross, you can even put it in the cheek of your mouth until you get to the dentist or wherever for them to put it back in. Do not put it back in yourself. I'm sure you've heard the story, but there is a coach that did that. The tooth got knocked out, and he put it back in, and guess what? He put it in the wrong way. So the kid had to go to the dentist, took it out, flipped it, put it back, and the kid didn't play baseball again. Go figure. But it can be put back in if it's done the right way. So hold on to it. You put it in milk. I love my kids, but I would never put their teeth in my own mouth. Gross. We can put it in their mouth maybe. But you can put it in water, milk, or in a mouth, and then get it there, and they can replace it, which is kind of cool. And then with eye injuries, you have to be careful with anything penetrating. If it's just some dirt, you can rinse it out. If it's something penetrating the eye, they should go to the ER. because there's all kinds of small vascular things in there, and it can penetrate a little further. So you want them to go to the ER, and they can handle how to deal with it from there. You can't give them any painkillers or anything. You can maybe put a little, it says here on our form to put a little bit of ice. I don't know if the kid will let you do that either. So just get them into the ER, call the parents for that. And same thing with facial injuries. If they're struck in the face, there's a good possibility the back of their head may have gotten hit as well. Or the reverberations from the hit goes to the back. So you must be careful for TBIs when there's any kind of facial injury. That is also going to the ER. Even if it doesn't look bad, because there's very delicate bones in the face that can break and hit something inside the face. And so with that, tell the parents, have them bring them in, because you don't know exactly what the injury is unless there's a scan that can be seen on exactly what happened. Okay, safety measures. So safety measures for everything that we just listed that can go wrong with a child. This is how you are going to prevent those things from happening any way you can. Proper maintenance of the playing site. So you're going to make sure there's no holes in the field where the kids can trip and sprain ankles. No rusted fences with big parts sticking out for them to cut themselves on. Pay close attention to playing conditions, which means if it's raining and flooding, it's okay to cancel practice. It can lead to injuries, especially that mud gets really slippery. Avoid overuse of muscles and joints. Again, your best pitcher is not going to be the best pitcher forever if you keep over pitching him. So make sure you teach other kids how to pitch and you have a nice rotation to go through so everyone is getting proper rest. This includes catchers as well. So avoid overuse of muscle and joints. Consistent and proper use of protective gear. So this means you're wearing helmets, you're wearing cups, you're using all the gear that you were supposed to. Effective coaching, supervision, and organization of warm-ups, practices, and games means make sure everyone's warmed up properly. Emphasize proper playing techniques. You don't want them short-arming and messing up that elbow. And these ones are careful compliance with all Little League rules having to do with safety. Catchers are always wearing their catching helmet. They have to have that the throat guard now. Catchers must wear a protective cup. No swinging bats. So what we do is the only person who has a bat is the kid that is hitting. Everybody else is in the dugout with their helmets on, ready to go. And the bats are on the outside of the dugout because you don't want bats in the dugout where they're all just messing with them. They can pick up the bat on their way out of the dugout when they're about to hit. No loose bats in the dugout. Okay. Players retrieving bats must wear a helmet. So who's ever going out to get the bat boy or bat girl, they have to have a helmet on, even though it's only 2 seconds. Helmets on. If you have an underage, If you have an underage first base coach, they must wear a helmet as well. So if you have a high schooler that's helping you coach, which happens a lot, and it's really good for high schoolers, I encourage you to involve them in Little League. And their base coaching, they must wear a helmet. Then it says, do not condone horseplay. It goes too far too quickly, and that is definitely true. Concussions and TBI, traumatic brain injuries. So I'm going to keep this brief because you guys are going to take an online class that goes further in depth. So I'm going to spare you a whole lot of redundancy, and I'm just going to keep it very brief. So if a player gets hit in the head, if they fall and they hit their head, if two players collide and head hits, maybe they get hit in the face, it knocks the head. If they fall down, doesn't look like it, but they actually hit their head. Be aware any of these situations can cause a concussion or a TBI. So if they get knocked out, obviously they're going to the ER. If their ears start ringing, obviously they're going to the ER. Nausea, vomiting, stuff like that. They're definitely going to the ER. So I'm going to list the symptoms, which are a little more tricky because with little guys, it's really hard to tell. So confusion or feeling dazed, concentration difficulties, balance problems and dizziness, slurred speech or slowed speech, memory loss, sensitivity to light or noise, clumsiness, headache, nausea, vomiting, that's a good dead giveaway, and behavioral changes. So pretty much if a player's not feeling himself. Now for some of those with the little guys, the slurred speech, the clumsiness, concentration difficulties, that's all T-billers, that's all caps, that's all the younger kids. So it is hard to tell with those, but just look at the kid and you can tell if they look a little bit off. And if that's the case, pull them in and then have them get seen. And remember that with the concussion or TBI protocol, there will be return to play after the fact that you'll have to follow. So next is seizures. Usually if a kid has a history of seizures, their parents know about it, they'll tell you. It'll be in their nifty binder with your mouth releases, so make sure you know that. Don't put anything in their mouth. Don't hold them down. Don't hold them down. Don't put anything in their mouth. Usually parents will tell you what to do. Clear the space, and you can keep things away from them so that way they're not hitting other things and then getting injured further. One of the most important things with a seizure is after the seizure. So the seizure, there's really nothing you can do about it. But after the seizure, it's kind of like when you're rebooting a computer. The computer's turning back on. You need to give it time to reset everything. So after a seizure, a person is very confused. They don't know what's going on, and they're just trying to get back to where their norm. And so it'll take a little bit of time. So you got to be patient with them. Give them a safe space. If their parents are there, their parents will be can help you through that process. But that's going to be the hardest part, is when they're waking up from that seizure, trying to get back, figure out their surroundings and what's going on. And then after that, they're going to EMS. If EMS has not already been called, which they probably would have been, but if they haven't, go send them right away. Okay, sudden cardiac arrest. Again, this one is another one where you are going to take a whole training video on it. So I am just going to give you the gist of it. If somebody passes out, there's no pulse, they are not breathing, we're going to start compressions right away. First thing, every time, compressions. If you don't know how to do rescue breathing, don't worry about it. It's not important. There is enough negative pressure from doing CPR, and there's enough oxygen in the system to keep them alive until EMS can get there. The most important things is compressions. I'm a medic. Trust me, this is what we tell everybody. If you don't know anything else, do compressions until help gets there. Compressions can be really tiring, so after a few minutes, have somebody else come in and you guys can switch out. Make sure you call 911 right away. Anytime anybody's not breathing or there's no pulse, you definitely need to call EMS every time. That's not a ask the parents thing. Is you're calling EMS. If you have a defibrillator, you need to get one. They are great. They will help you. A couple of our leagues have them. I know Sarah Mesa has one. I bought it. It's pretty cool. It's awesome. It tells you exactly what to do. As soon as you open it, it says remain calm, place pads, and it shows you what you're going to do is you're going to make yourself a nice heart sandwich. So that way the electrical pulses can get to each other. And then it tells you what to do. It's never going to shock if a shock is not needed. So you can't accidentally shock somebody. That's not a thing that happens. So don't even worry about that. Just plop it on there. And then when it's reading, don't touch anything because it can read you if you're touching. So you don't want that. When it's reading, let go, let it read it, and then it'll tell you whether to shock or not shock. No matter what it tells you, you go back to doing your CPR. And then when it says time to shock, let go, shock. But all these directions, I hope I'm not putting too much on you. Don't worry about it. All those directions on how to use an AED, the AED will tell you, which is really great. So all you need to worry about, compressions. Something happens, just do compressions until somebody else gets there for help. Call 911. With your compressions, you're going to keep your arms straight. You're going to be directly over them, and you're going to push down hard and fast. If you think you're doing your compressions too hard, I'm going to tell you, you are not. Now with little kids, sometimes maybe that is a possibility, but do you know what sucks more than a broken rib? Being dead. So, since that is the case, worry more about compressions and getting that blood flowing. That's more important than breaking a rib. I will end it there because you will get all that information when you take the online class. But compressions, they save lives. Okay, and we have reached the end of it. So there are a couple last words here, which are a couple rules. So it says there must be a coach in the dugout even when one player is in the dugout. That is true. I've got nailed for that. If you even step out, the blue will be like, hey, get back in the dugout. So even if you have one player in there, a coach has to be in the dugout at all times. Practice coaches, anybody that ever has contact with a player must have a background check. Even if it's one time only, it doesn't matter. If the snack bar, whoever, if anybody has communication with a kid, even if they're a parent, they have to have a background check every time. A player that's retrieving the bat must have a helmet. We went over that. Only the correct number of coaches for a particular division may be in the dugout. For example, majors, minors, seniors, and above. Juniors, you can only have 3 coaches total, and there's no communicating during tournament season outside of the fence. So once your coaches are in there, even if they're a practice coach or whatever, you can't communicate with them on the opposite side of the fence during tournaments. So remember that. If a coach is ejected, they are automatically suspended for a minimum of the next game played and may not be replaced. So if you have a coach that is suspended, you can't replace him with another coach. That's part of the penalty, is now you are short a coach, which means you may have to use a player for your first base coach, or you just not have a first base coach, just have third base coach communicate to both runners. So keep that in mind when you're out there coaching. And the very last thing I'm going to leave you with here is Band-Aids and ice. When it comes to Little League and this age group, Band-Aids fix everything. Even if it doesn't look like it's a big owie, it's little, put a Band-Aid on it, that kid will feel better. For other things, put ice on it, the kid feels better. For a lot of things you're going to see, there are going to be small issues. And again, ice and a Band-Aid fixes everything with these little guys. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or our safety officer, and I will be happy to answer all of them.